Buckle up, everyone, because today we're diving deep into a potential space race that's really starting to heat up.
Oh, yeah.
And this time it's not the classic U.S. versus Russia rivalry.
Right.
We're talking about China stepping onto the scene with some serious ambitions for super heavy rockets, ready to challenge the likes of SpaceX.
You know what's really interesting about all this?
What's that?
It's a huge shift in how we're approaching space travel altogether. Reusable rockets, they're completely changing the game,
Right.
slashing the cost of getting to orbit and opening up all sorts of possibilities that, well, used to be pure science fiction.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, SpaceX's Starship is definitely the one grabbing all the headlines these days, right?
Absolutely. It's got this bold design, and their testing program is moving at lightning speed.
But here's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
China's Long March 9 program, well, it's not just about playing catch-up. It seems like they're aiming for some very specific goals.
Mhm.
Goals that SpaceX isn't even prioritizing.
You're right on the money with that. It's a crucial observation.
So let's break this down a bit.
Okay.
Both Starship and Long March 9 are designed to carry over 150 tons to low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
They both use that same super-efficient methane and oxygen fuel combo.
Mm-hmm.
And both rockets are reusable with 2 stages.
You know, this isn't just coincidence. This convergence, it just highlights how rocket science is, well, it's focusing on the most effective solution.
Okay, so on the surface, they sound pretty similar.
Right.
Giant rockets, reusable tech, aiming for the same payload capacity, almost like, twins separated at birth.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
But are you saying there's something more profound at play here?
exactly. Let's dig into those subtle but crucial differences. You see, Starship is way ahead in its development and testing phases.
Right, they've done a bunch of test flights already.
Right. And SpaceX is even aiming for a crewed moon landing by 2025.
Wow.
But the Long March 9, well, it actually has 2 versions planned. A basic 3-stage design is set to launch around 2030. But then the fully reusable 2-stage version, we're not expecting that until 2040.
2040.
Yeah.
That seems so far off, especially with SpaceX moving so fast.
I know.
What's the reason for that delay? Is China just lagging behind in this tech race?
Well, that's where China's long-term strategy really comes into focus. You see, they're not just trying to copy what SpaceX is doing. Their ambitions, they go way beyond Mars.
Okay.
Think permanent moon bases, not just flags and footprints. We're talking infrastructure at Lagrange points.
Hold on, Lagrange points.
Yeah.
That sounds like something straight out of Star Trek. What are those?
Well, science fiction often pulls from real science, and Lagrange points are a perfect example. Imagine points in space where the gravitational forces of Earth and another celestial body, like the sun or the moon, kind of balance each other out.
Okay.
It creates this cosmic sweet spot where objects can just stay put, relatively stationary, with minimal fuel consumption.
So they're like cosmic parking spots
Exactly.
where you can park a space station and it'll just hang out there.
That's a fantastic way to put it.
Wow.
And that's what makes them so valuable for China's long-term plans. They want to build fuel depots, research stations, maybe even manufacturing facilities at these Lagrange points.
So they're thinking decades, maybe even centuries ahead. Like they're planning to build a whole new civilization in space.
You got it. And that's where their idea of space-based solar power comes in.
Space-based solar power.
Imagine constructing massive solar arrays in space where, well, sunlight is constant and there's no atmosphere to block the energy.
Okay.
You could potentially beam that clean energy back to Earth 2047.
Wow.
It would be revolutionary for our energy landscape and a game changer for sustainability and climate change.
That sounds incredibly ambitious, almost hard to wrap my head around. Is that tech even remotely feasible right now?
It's definitely still in its early stages,
Right.
but the fundamental concept is sound, and China's putting serious money into research and development in this area.
And they're not alone,
Yeah.
right? I mean, other countries are exploring this too.
They are. The US, Japan, they're all looking at space-based solar power as a potential long-term energy solution.
So this isn't just some far-fetched sci-fi fantasy.
No.
This is something that could actually happen in our lifetime.
It could.
That's pretty mind-blowing. But let's bring it back down to Earth, literally.
Okay.
All of this, whether it's Starship going to Mars or China building a space-based power grid, it all hinges on one crucial factor:
Yeah.
cost. Both of these rockets are designed to drastically cut the price per kilogram to orbit, aiming for something like $1,500
Yeah.
compared to the thousands of dollars it costs with current rockets. It's a massive reduction.
It is. And it's not just about saving money. It's about transforming the economics of space altogether. When you make space travel that affordable, you're not just sending more stuff up there. You're opening up possibilities that we could only dream of before. Asteroid mining, large-scale space habitats, maybe even space tourism for everyday people.
Right.
The possibilities are pretty much endless.
Whoa! So considering all of this, should Elon Musk be worried? Is China going to overtake SpaceX in this new space race?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it's important to look at this from a balanced perspective.
Right.
Firstly, competition is generally a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It drives innovation, pushes both sides to improve, and ultimately benefits everyone.
Right.
And secondly, their goals are different, at least for now. SpaceX is laser-focused on Mars colonization, while China is prioritizing near-Earth infrastructure and development. They're not directly competing for the same resources or customers at this point.
But you're hinting that this could change, right?
Yeah, exactly. The real wild card is how all of this will impact global politics and collaboration in space. Will it lead to a new era of cooperation? Or will we see a more fragmented, more competitive space environment? These are questions we can't answer definitively. Fascinating. We've been talking about these grand plans China has for space and how they're kind of different from what SpaceX is doing. It's a pretty fascinating change in how they're approaching things.
For sure. And I'm still trying to get my head around this whole Lagrange point thing.
Yeah.
It sounds so sci-fi, you know?
It does, doesn't it? But it's a real thing. And it's really important for understanding what China's trying to do in the long run. Picture this. Points in space where the gravity of Earth and the sun or Earth and the moon, they sort of cancel each other out.
Okay.
It creates this kind of cosmic sweet spot, a place where objects can just stay put,
Right.
relatively stationary, without needing much fuel at all.
So you're saying these Lagrange points are like cosmic parking spots?
That's a great way to think about it.
Where you could park a space station or a habitat and it would just stay there.
Exactly. And that's precisely what makes them so valuable for building infrastructure in space. China wants to build fuel depots, research stations, maybe even manufacturing facilities at these points.
So they could like refuel or repair spacecraft in space without having to launch everything from Earth.
Exactly. It would completely change what we're capable of in space and bring down the costs significantly.
That's incredible. It's like building a whole network of pit stops and service stations all across the solar system. But why is China so focused on these Lagrange points? What's the strategic advantage?
It's all about having a permanent presence in space, creating this network of infrastructure that can support long-term exploration and development. Think about it. If you want to go to the moon or Mars, you need a place to stop along the way, to refuel, make repairs, maybe even do some research. And Lagrange points, well, they're the perfect place for those kinds of outposts.
And this ties into their moon ambitions too, right? They're not just talking about quick visits like the Apollo missions. They want something much bigger.
Exactly. China is aiming for a sustained presence on the moon with the goal of building permanent habitats and research outposts. They've already landed rovers on the lunar surface, and they're planning a crewed mission in the next few years. But their vision goes beyond just planting a flag. They're talking about mining resources on the moon, maybe extracting water ice for fuel and life support, even establishing a lunar base for scientific research and exploration.
Wow. So they're really thinking decades, centuries into the future. It's like they're laying the groundwork for a whole new chapter in human history.
I think that's a great way to put it. And this is where their concept of space-based solar power comes in.
Right.
Imagine building these massive solar arrays in space where the sunlight is constant and there's no atmosphere to block the energy.
Okay.
You could potentially beam that clean energy back to Earth 24/7. It's a mind-boggling idea that could completely transform how we get our energy.
Hold on. Beaming energy from space? That sounds like something out of a movie. Is that even possible?
It's definitely still in its early stages,
Yeah.
but the basic idea is sound, and China is investing heavily in research and development to make it happen. And they're not alone. The US, Japan, other countries are exploring space-based solar power as a potential long-term energy solution too.
So it's not just a pipe dream. This is something that could actually become reality in our lifetime. That's incredibly exciting. But let's be realistic. All these grand plans, the moon bases, beaming solar power from space, all of it, it's going to take massive resources, massive funding. How can China afford to do all of this?
That's the key question, and it brings us back to that fundamental shift that's happening in space right now. Reusable rockets like Starship and Long March 9 are making it dramatically cheaper to get to space. They're making it possible to launch payloads into orbit for a fraction of what it used to cost. And that opens up a whole world of possibilities, not just for governments, but for private companies and entrepreneurs too.
So you're saying the economics of space are changing. It's becoming more affordable to do business in space.
Exactly. And that's why we're seeing this surge in activity, both from established players like SpaceX and from newcomers like China. They see the potential of space as this new frontier for economic growth and technological innovation, and they're willing to invest big to secure their place in this emerging market.
So this isn't just about national pride or scientific curiosity.
No.
It's about economic dominance, about shaping the future of a whole new industry.
Precisely. And that's what makes this new space race so fascinating. It's not just about who gets to the moon first or who plants a flag on Mars. It's about who controls the resources, who develops the technology, who sets the rules for this vast new frontier.
So we're talking about a potential power shift on a global scale.
It's certainly a possibility. As space becomes more accessible, more commercially viable, we're likely to see more competition between nations for resources, for prime locations, for technological advantage.
So it's like a new gold rush, but this time it's happening in space.
In some ways, yes, but it's also much more than that. It's about pushing the boundaries of human ingenuity, exploring new frontiers, potentially discovering new knowledge that could change our understanding of the universe and our place in it.
Okay, so we've talked about China's ambitions, their focus on Lagrange points, their moon-based plans, their vision for space-based solar power. It's all incredibly exciting. But I have to ask, what are the risks involved? What could go wrong with all of this?
That's a crucial question, and one we need to think about seriously. There are definitely risks involved in any kind of space exploration and development, and those risks get even bigger as we venture further out into the solar system and take on more ambitious projects.
So what are some of the specific risks we should be considering?
Well, there are the obvious technical challenges. Building and operating complex systems in the harsh environment of space. Radiation, micrometeoroids, extreme temperatures, these are all things that can threaten spacecraft and astronauts.
And there's the whole logistical challenge of getting everything you need into space, right? The fuel, food, water, spare parts, all of that has to be launched from Earth, at least for now.
Exactly. And the cost of those launches, even with reusable rockets, is still significant. And then there's the question of human health. How will long-duration spaceflight affect the human body? We know astronauts experience bone loss, muscle atrophy, and other changes in microgravity. How will we deal with those risks on extended missions to the moon or Mars?
So there are a lot of technical and logistical hurdles to overcome. But what about the bigger picture? What are the potential geopolitical implications of this new space race?
That's a vital question, and one we need to approach with both optimism and caution. On the one hand, increased activity in space could foster international cooperation as countries work together to overcome shared challenges and achieve common goals.
That sounds like the ideal scenario. But what about the potential for conflict? Could this new space race lead to tensions between nations or even escalate into something more dangerous?
It's definitely a possibility. As space becomes more strategically and economically important, we could see increased competition for resources, for prime locations, for technological advantage. And this could lead to friction between countries, especially if there aren't clear international regulations and agreements governing what happens in space.
So it's like a new Wild West, but this time it's happening in orbit around Earth.
In some ways, yes. And that's why it's so important to have open dialogue and cooperation between nations. We need to establish clear rules of the road, ensure responsible use of space resources, and prevent the militarization of space.
Makes sense. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, turning space into another arena for geopolitical rivalry. That wouldn't benefit anyone in the long run.
Exactly. We need to learn from history and work together to create a sustainable and peaceful future in space. And that includes addressing some of the ethical challenges that come with expanding our presence beyond Earth.
Ethical challenges. Can you expand on that a little?
Sure. Think about the environmental impact of space travel, the potential for exploitation of space resources, and the question of who has the right to claim territory or establish settlements beyond Earth. These are complex issues that will require careful consideration and international cooperation.
So it's not just about the technology.
Yeah.
It's about how we use that technology and what kind of future we want to create in space.
That's a key takeaway. This isn't just a scientific or technological endeavor, it's a human endeavor, and it raises profound questions about our values, our responsibilities, and our place in the universe.
I think we need a moment to digest all of this before we continue. This new space race, it's clearly about much more than just rockets and technology. It's about economics, geopolitics, ethics, even our understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos.
I agree. It's a lot to take in, but it's a conversation worth having, and we're only just scratching the surface.
So we've been talking about China's plans for space and all the potential impacts of this new space race. But I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something a little closer to home. How how will all of this affect us here on Earth?
That's a great question, and I think it's on a lot of people's minds right now. As space becomes easier to get to and more, commercialized,
Yeah.
it's going to have these ripple effects. You'll see it in the economy and technology, even in our culture.
So it's not just about, astronauts and rockets. We're talking about actual changes that everyday people will feel.
Absolutely. Think about the industries that are already being impacted by space: satellite communications, GPS navigation, Earth observation. These are all things we depend on daily, and they're all made possible by what we're doing in space. As the space industry grows, we can expect even more innovations that will touch our lives in countless ways.
Okay, can you give us some concrete examples? What kind of new technologies or industries might come out of this new space race?
Sure. One area that's generating a lot of buzz is space-based manufacturing. Imagine being able to build things in the microgravity environment of space. You could create materials and structures that are, well, just impossible to make on Earth.
Wow.
And this could revolutionize a bunch of industries, from pharmaceuticals to electronics.
So we could have new drugs, new materials, new products, all thanks to space. That's pretty amazing.
It is. And it's not just limited to manufacturing. There's also the potential for space tourism. As launch costs come down and space travel becomes more accessible, we could see a whole new industry pop up around, taking people on trips to orbit or even beyond.
Space tourism. That sounds like well, that still sounds like science fiction to me. But I guess it's not so far-fetched anymore, huh?
Not at all. There are a bunch of companies already working on developing spacecraft designed specifically for space tourism, and some of them are planning to offer, like, suborbital flights in the next few years. These flights will give people a taste of weightlessness and those amazing views of Earth from above.
So we could actually see regular people taking vacations in space in our lifetime.
That's incredible. But but what about the economic side of things? Will this new space race create jobs, create opportunities here on Earth?
Absolutely. The space industry is already a major economic driver, creating jobs in all sorts of fields, from engineering and manufacturing to software development and research. As the industry keeps growing, we can expect to see even more job creation and economic growth.
So it's not just about scientific advancement or national pride. It's about creating a whole new sector of the economy, a sector that could benefit people all over the world.
Exactly. And it's not just about the direct jobs created by the space industry either. There are also the indirect benefits that come from, you know, technological spin-offs and innovations. For example, developing lightweight materials for spacecraft has led to stronger, more efficient materials that we use in everything from cars to airplanes.
So the investments we make in space exploration can actually have a positive impact on our lives here on Earth in ways we might not even realize. You got it. And that's why it's so important to see space exploration not as, a luxury or a distraction, but as a real investment in our future. It's an investment in our economy, our technology, and our understanding of the universe.
That's a powerful message. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the new space race, what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as we move forward into this exciting new era of space exploration?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that space is no longer just for governments and astronauts. It's becoming more commercial, more accessible, and that opens up a world of possibilities for all of us. We need to be thinking about how we can be a part of this new space economy,
Yeah.
how we can benefit from the technological advancements that are coming out of it, and how we can make sure that space is used responsibly and sustainably, for the good of everyone.
Well said. I
Yeah.
think that's a fantastic note to end on. So to our listeners, keep looking up, keep exploring, and keep asking questions because the future of space is really in our hands.
I couldn't agree more. It's an amazing time to be alive, and I can't wait to see what the future holds as we keep pushing those boundaries of human exploration and discovery.